The first thing Peter Parker felt was the pull. It hit like a sudden, hard tug on his whole body. 1 second he was swinging between buildings, the wind loud in his ears, a stolen tech bag dangling from a web line behind him. The next second, his spider sense turned into a full-body alarm. Something was wrong in the air. Peter's head snapped up. Above the street, the sky tore open. It did not look like a normal portal. It looked like the world had ripped, like someone had grabbed the blue sky and yanked it apart. The edges crackled. The inside was not darkness. It was somewhere else. "Okay," Peter said, breath sharp. "That's new." The thief looked up too and tripped over his own feet. Peter would have laughed if his skin was not crawling. Peter shot a web at the side of a building to change direction. He tried to swing away from the tear. His body was already moving before his thoughts caught up. That was how spider sense worked. It saved him by being rude. But the pull got worse. His web line went tight. The street rushed under him. For a split second, Peter thought the portal might collapse, or spit out something at him, or explode. Instead, it grabbed him like a hand. "Hey, hey!" Peter shouted, and then the world snapped. There was no smooth travel, no bright tunnel, no slow drift. Just a violent jerk and a slam. Peter hit asphalt hard enough to rattle his teeth. His shoulders skidded. His palms burned. He rolled twice, popped up on one knee out of habit, and flung a web line at nothing, ready to swing. Except the buildings were wrong. They were taller in places, shaped different. The street signs were different. The air smelled like smoke and metal. And people were screaming. Peter's spider sense kept firing. Left, right, above, behind. He twisted, eyes taking everything in fast. Up the block, a fight was happening. Not a two guys punching fight, a real, super fight. Cars were flipping. Glass was falling like rain. A chunk of a building's side slid down and smashed into the street. A yellow school bus was sliding too. Its tires were smoking. It had hit something, and now it was skidding sideways toward a crowd at the corner. Peter did not think. He moved. He sprinted, fast as a blur to normal eyes, and shot 2 webs at the bus's front bumper. Then he shot 2 more at a streetlight pole, then another at a building wall, making a web triangle. The bus kept sliding. Peter dug his feet into the road. His boots scraped. His arms shook as the web lines went tight. He braced his back like a human wedge and pulled. The bus slowed, inch by inch. The crowd stared like they forgot how to breathe. Peter grunted. Okay, everyone, move back. Back." The bus jerked again, and Peter's webbing stretched. His shoulders screamed. He pushed harder, then snapped a fresh web net under the bus like a hammock. The bus stopped with a loud, ugly squeal. Peter didn't celebrate. He ran to the bus door and yanked it open. Kids were crying. A teacher was shouting names. Someone's forehead was bleeding. Peter's heart squeezed. Hey, you're okay. You're okay. Everybody out. Nice and quick. Single file. You good job holding on." A boy stared at the mask. "Are you a spider?" "Not on purpose," Peter said, already helping a kid jump down. Behind him, the super fight up the street got worse. Something slammed into a building and cracked it. People ran. Someone fell. Peter's spider sense spiked again, and he turned just in time to see a body fly through the air and crash into a parked car. The person stood up anyway. He was a teenager, blue and yellow suit, cape, bruised face. He looked at Peter like he was seeing a magic trick. Peter blinked back. "Hi, you seem busy." The teen floated a few inches off the ground, like it was normal. "Who are you?" Peter opened his mouth to answer, and something cut through the air like a cannonball. Peter's spider sense shrieked. He grabbed the nearest kid and yanked them down behind the bus, then threw up a web shield without thinking. A shockwave slapped the street. The web shield caught chunks of glass. Peter peeked over the bus. His stomach dropped. These weren't normal criminals. A group of soldiers in strange armor had pushed out of a fresh portal farther up the road. They looked wrong, too sharp, too eager. They moved like they didn't care who got hurt. The teen hero's jaw tightened. "Flaxens," he said like it was a swear word. Peter stared. "Bless you?" The teen didn't laugh. He shot forward, fists up. Peter's spider sense pulsed again. Another danger, not the soldiers. From high above, on a rooftop across the street, a man hovered in the air. He had a mustache. He looked calm. Too calm. Like the chaos was just weather. His eyes tracked Peter. Not with surprise. With interest. Peter swallowed. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "New city, new aliens, new flying mustache guy. Got it." He shot webs to the bus again, locking it down, then turned back toward the screaming street. "All right," Peter said, voice firm. "Let's do the thing." And he ran straight into a world that did not feel like it played by any of his rules. Cecil Stedman watched the footage 3 times before he blinked. On the big screens in the GDA command center, the street scene replayed from 4 angles. Drone view, traffic cam, a shaky phone video someone had uploaded before the signal got jammed. The new guy moved like a pinball with a brain. He was everywhere. Catching the bus, pulling civilians behind cover, webbing alien weapons to the ground, dodging shots that should have hit him. Cecil leaned forward, hands clasped. "Slow it down." A tech did, frame by frame. The masked figure's head turned a fraction of a second before an energy blast passed where his face had been. Cecil's eyes narrowed. He sensed it. Could be enhanced hearing. The tech offered. Cecil shook his head. "No, not like that. That's something else." On another screen, Mark Grayson Invincible punched through a flaxen soldier and got knocked back by a heavier one. Mark was strong, but he still fought like a kid who had not had enough real time in the fire. The new guy fought like someone who had been in danger too many times to count. Cecil's mouth tightened. "Where's Nolan?" "Hovering," another agent said, not meeting Cecil's eyes. "Watching." Cecil did not like that. He tapped the table. "I want the masked one alive. No accidental deaths. If Nolan decides to solve the problem with his hands, I want eyes on him." A technician cleared his throat. "Sir, if he's that fast, what if he runs?" Cecil's expression did not change. "Then we track him. We learn him. We plan." He stared at the screen where the masked figure slapped a web onto a falling street sign and swung it out of the way like it weighed nothing. Cecil spoke quietly. "And we hope he's the kind who can be reasoned with." Peter's lungs burned, but he did not stop moving. The Flaxens were fast and mean. Their rifles spat blue blasts that blew holes in pavement and tossed people like dolls. Peter hated that. He hated the way the soldiers didn't even look at the civilians they were hurting, like the people were just objects in the way. A blast hit a storefront. The glass exploded outward. Peter shot a web net across the front, like a giant bandage, catching shards before they hit a woman running with her baby. He yanked them behind a car. "Stay down," he said. "Do not be a hero today. That's my job." The woman stared at him, shaking. "Who are you?" Peter's throat tightened. He wanted to say his name. He wanted to say, "I'm just a guy who tries." But in a new universe, with new threats, that felt unsafe. For her, for him, for anyone he might meet. "Spider-Man," he said instead. It's a long story." He swung back into the street, chasing a Flaxon who had grabbed a man by the collar. The alien lifted the man like he was light. Peter's spider sense yanked him right. He ducked, and a blast took the top off a mailbox. He landed on the alien's shoulder and wrapped the arm, holding the civilian with 3 fast webs. "Put him down," Peter said, voice sharp. The Flaxon snarled in a language Peter didn't know and tried to slam Peter into the ground. Peter let it happen. He bent like rubber, rolled with the hit, then kicked off and pulled hard with both arms. The webbing tightened. The alien's arm jerked. The man fell free. Peter shot a web under the man like a safety net and swung him out of the danger zone, dropping him behind cover with a soft thump. "Breathe," Peter told him. "You're okay. You're okay." Then he was gone again. Up the street, the teen hero, Invincible, was getting swarmed. Mark punched through one soldier, then another grabbed him from behind. Peter's spider sense flared. A heavy Flaxan, bigger than the rest, aimed a weapon that hummed like a charging engine. Peter's brain did fast math. If that hits Mark, Mark might live, but the blast will go through him and into the building behind. A building full of people. Peter shot a web at Mark's waist and yanked. Mark jerked sideways midair, eyes wide. The blast missed by inches and tore a smoking hole through the street. Mark snapped his head toward Peter. "What?" "No time," Peter shouted. "Civilians." Mark's face tightened like he didn't want to hear that, but he looked anyway. He saw the people pinned behind cars, the kid crying, the old man who couldn't run fast enough. Mark hesitated. That was all the heavy flaxen needed. It charged Mark, fists up, and hit him so hard Mark flew back and crashed through a wall. Peter's stomach dropped. He shot forward, not to fight the heavy one head-on, but to change the field. He webbed the heavy's weapon to its own arm. Then he webbed the heavy's legs together. Then he webbed the ground under it into a sticky trap. The heavy flaxan roared and ripped free like the webs were tape. Peter's eyes widened. "Okay," he whispered. "That's not great." The heavy swung at him. Peter's spider sense pulled him back before the fist even moved. The punch smashed a car like it was made of thin metal. The car folded. The alarm screamed. Peter swallowed hard and did not try to trade punches. He danced around the heavy, firing webs into its visor, into its joints, into the weapon's vents. He aimed for control, not damage. But the heavy was learning too. It stepped back, then slammed both hands into the ground. The shockwave rippled. Peter's feet lifted. His web line snapped free from a broken pole, and Peter tumbled. His spider sense screamed again. Something fast was coming from above. Peter flipped midair and barely caught himself on the side of a building. Then a red and white blur smashed into the heavy flaxan like a missile. Omni-Man. He hit the alien once, and the heavy flew through 2 cars and a bus stop. Peter froze. Omni-Man hovered, fists clenched, looking bored. He turned his head slightly toward Peter, like Peter was a question he hadn't decided to answer yet. Peter's mouth went dry. He forced himself to breathe. Omni-Man shot forward again and grabbed the heavy flaxan by the face. He lifted it. The alien's legs kicked. Omni-Man did not care. He slammed it into the street with a crack that made Peter wince. Peter's spider sense flared, not at danger but at something else. A warning. Not duck. More like, this is wrong. Peter swung down and landed a few yards away, hands up, voice calm. "Hey, big mustache guy. Love the, confidence. But there are people here." Omni-Man didn't look at the people. He looked at Peter. His eyes were flat. "You're not from here." Peter tried to joke, because that was what he did when he was scared. What gave it away? The fashion? Omni-Man's gaze flicked to the webs stuck all over the street. That. Peter's spider sense buzzed again. Mark was coming back, coughing dust, floating out of the broken wall. Mark looked from Omni-Man to Peter, confused and angry. "Dad, who is this guy?" Peter wanted to say, "Kid, your dad scares me." Instead, he said, "Spider-Man, hi." The flaxan portals began to shimmer. The soldiers started pulling back, dragging injured troops. The heavy flaxan, somehow still moving, crawled toward the portal. Omni-Man could have ended it. Peter could feel that. Instead, Omni-Man just watched them retreat like it wasn't worth the time. Peter watched too. He hated that. As the last portal snapped shut, the street fell into a broken quiet. Sirens sounded in the distance. People cried. Someone yelled for help. Peter turned toward the closest scream, ready to run again. And then the air changed. A high, sharp whine cut through everything. Drones dropped out of the sky. Not little toys, real machines, black, fast, with lights that scanned. A voice came from a speaker, calm like a man ordering lunch. "Unidentified masked individual," the voice said. "Do not move." Peter stopped mid-step. Mark hovered near him, tense. "That's Cecil." Peter tilted his head. "Is Cecil a friend?" Mark's face did a complicated thing. "He's the government." Peter's stomach sank. The drones circled. A red dot slid over Peter's chest, then his head, then his hands. Peter raised his palms slowly. Okay, let's all take a breath. I am very cooperative when not being sniped. Omni-Man hovered above, silent, still watching. The speaker crackled again. We saw what you did. We also saw what you are. Peter's spider sense buzzed, not with a punch or a blast, but with the feeling of being hunted. He kept his voice light anyway. What I am is tired. The voice did not laugh. Come with us, Cecil said, and we can do this the easy way. Peter looked at the wrecked street, the shaken kids, the blood on the pavement, Mark's bruised face, Omni-Man's calm eyes. Peter had landed in a world where people got hurt fast, and now the people with power were already trying to put a leash on him. Peter swallowed. Easy way, he said quietly. Yeah, I'm not sure this world does easy. The facility was clean in the way that made Peter feel dirty. It was not a jail with bars. It was worse. It was smooth walls and bright lights and doors that opened only when someone else decided. Peter walked between two armed agents while drones floated overhead like metal vultures. Mark flew beside them, arms crossed, trying to look like he was in control. He wasn't fooling anyone. Peter kept his hands visible. He kept his jokes small. His spider sense wasn't screaming, but it wouldn't shut up either. It pulsed like a headache. Every corner could hide something. Every camera could be a threat. A door slid open. Peter stepped into a wide room with a table, chairs, and more cameras than furniture. A man sat behind the glass on the other side. He was older, sharp eyes, calm face. Cecil. He pressed a button. His voice came through a speaker, clear and flat. Thank you for coming voluntarily. Peter stared at the glass. This was voluntary? Cecil's mouth twitched like he might smile if he remembered how. You can leave whenever you want. You'll just be leaving through a lot of locked doors. Mark looked annoyed. Cecil. Mark, Cecil said, cutting him off without raising his voice. Go home. Mark's jaw clenched. He saved people. I saw, Cecil said. That is why I'm talking instead of shooting. Peter lifted a finger. Good plan. Big fan. Cecil's eyes moved over Peter's suit. Torn in places. Burn marks on one sleeve. Webbing still stuck to the fabric. You have no file, Cecil said. No records. No DNA match. No known origin. Then you fall out of the sky during a Flaxen raid and start performing at a level that makes my sensors nervous. Peter leaned back in the chair. Your sensors get nervous easily. Cecil ignored that. Take off the mask. Peter's body tensed. No. Mark, watching through a side window, shifted like he wanted to argue, but he held back. Cecil's voice stayed calm. This is not a request made for my comfort. It's made for safety. Peter's throat tightened. Uncle Ben's face flashed in his mind, not as a picture, but as a feeling. The weight of one choice. The cost. Peter shook his head. My safety. Your safety. Everybody's safety. The mask stays on. Cecil studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, like he had expected that answer. Fine, Cecil said. Then we learn other things. A door opened behind Peter. A man in a lab coat entered, followed by a small swarm of floating drones the size of dinner plates. Mark's voice came through another speaker, softer now. That's Robot. Robot's eyes scanned Peter like Peter was a math problem. Fascinating. The web compound is not organic, yet it's deployed like it's part of his body. Peter turned his head a fraction. Hi, Robot. I love your vibe. It's like a haunted calculator. Robot didn't react. We'll start with basic metrics. Peter's spider sense buzzed. Needles, machines, traps. Robot's drones moved closer. Peter stayed still, but his muscles coiled under the suit. Cecil's voice cut in. No pain, no tricks. If you cooperate, this ends quickly. Peter exhaled through his nose. That is not how my life usually goes, but sure. Robot collected samples. Not blood, not yet. Skin cells from the suit. Air readings around Peter's body. Heat patterns. Muscle movement while Peter squeezed a sensor. Peter watched the numbers appear on Robot's screen. Robot's calm voice didn't change, but Mark's eyes widened behind the glass as he watched too. Your strength-to-mass ratio, Robot said, is exceptional. Peter shrugged. I do push-ups. Robot leaned closer. Your reflex response happens before visual confirmation of threats. That suggests predictive sensing. Peter's spider sense buzzed like it was offended by being talked about. Cecil's voice came again. What are you? Peter's humor thinned, but he kept it alive. A guy in a mask who hates bullies. Cecil didn't take the bait. Where are you from? Peter hesitated. He could lie. He could dodge. But he didn't want to build a friendship on a lie. Not with Mark watching. Not with civilians outside. He chose the simple truth. In clean pieces. I'm from another city, Peter said. Another Earth, I guess. I got powers when I was a kid. I did something selfish once, and someone I loved died because of it. I decided I'd never let that happen again if I could help it. Mark's face softened. Peter continued, voice steady. So I help people, even when it's hard, even when it ruins my day, even when nobody says thank you. Cecil was quiet. Robot watched, as if trying to measure the sincerity. Peter added because he couldn't stop himself. Also, I take pictures of myself sometimes for proof. It's a whole thing. Mark frowned. Why would you? Peter lifted a hand. Long story. I have a camera. Or I had a camera. Pretty sure it got turned into dust back there. Robot spoke like a man hearing music. You document your own hero work. Peter nodded. Yes. For reasons that are sad and also rent-related. Cecil's voice cut in. No killing. Peter blinked. Excuse me? Cecil didn't blink back. You won fights without lethal force. That's rare. But don't mistake that for a rule I will accept without question. This world isn't kind. Peter leaned forward. Then it needs kindness more, not less. Cecil's eyes hardened slightly. It needs to survive. Peter felt anger rise. Not hot rage. Cold anger. The kind that comes when someone says innocent lives are optional. I survived by saving people, Peter said. That's the point. Robot interrupted, still calm. Your webbing supply is limited. Peter's stomach dropped. Wait, how do you… Robot gestured at Peter's belt. Your cartridges are low. Your formula is complex. You will need a lab soon. Peter's cheeks warmed. He hated being seen that clearly. Cecil's voice turned practical. Here's what happens next. You work with us. You operate under guidelines. You stay trackable. You don't cause more problems than you solve. Peter stared at the glass. And if I say no? Cecil paused, like he was choosing the least ugly answer. Then I keep you here until I understand you, or until I can stop you. Mark's fists clenched. Cecil. Mark. Cecil said again, firm. This is above your pay grade. Peter looked at Mark through the window. Mark looked back, torn between trust and fear. Peter made a choice. Not because Cecil scared him. Cecil did. But because people outside were still screaming. Flaxons would come again, or someone worse would. Peter hated cages, but he hated leaving people helpless more. Peter spread his hands on the table, palms up. Okay, I'll cooperate. Cecil's voice didn't soften. Good. Peter raised one finger. With conditions. A pause. Speak. Peter took a breath. I don't kill. I don't do executions. I don't handle problems by making people disappear. If you try to order me to do that, we're done. Robot tilted his head slightly. Mark's eyes widened like he couldn't believe someone would say that to Cecil. Cecil's voice stayed steady. You're in no position to negotiate. Peter's voice went quieter, but stronger. You're in no position to own me. Silence filled the room. Then Cecil said, Fine, for now. Peter nodded once. For now. A new door opened. A female agent stepped in and tossed something onto the table. Peter caught it, his suit mask, cleaned, folded. He didn't react, but inside, he felt a small relief. They hadn't tried to pull it off. That mattered. Cecil spoke again. We'll give you access to a workspace. Limited. We'll assign you a liaison. Mark Grayson can babysit you in the field. Mark's face snapped up. Babysit? Peter pointed at Mark through the window. Please don't call it babysitting. He'll start charging me. Mark glared, then almost smiled. Robot leaned in. I want to study your web formula. Peter's humor flickered back. Absolutely not. Robot didn't blink. It could improve your operational efficiency. Peter tapped the cartridges on his belt. It could also let the wrong person web up a whole city. No. Cecil's voice slid in like a knife. You're not the only smart person in this building. Peter met the glass with his eyes. I know. That was the problem. They moved Peter to a small room later. Not a cell. A room with a bed, a desk, and a camera in the corner that didn't pretend to be hidden. Peter sat on the bed and stared at his suit laid out on the desk. He peeled his gloves off and flexed his fingers. Small cuts, bruises. His hand still shook a little from the bus. He reached into a pouch and pulled out a crushed piece of plastic. A memory card. Bent. His camera was gone. He let out a low sigh. Of course you're gone. He looked at the ceiling. The camera stared back. Peter raised a hand and waved at it with 2 fingers. Hi, I know you're watching. Please enjoy the show of me being extremely normal. No reply, of course. A knock came at the door. Mark stepped in, careful like he didn't want to spook Peter. Mark looked tired. Younger up close. He tried to act confident, but his eyes kept flicking to Peter's mask on the desk. So, Mark said. Awkward. Spider-Man. Peter put his gloves back on slowly. So, he echoed. Invincible. Mark rubbed the back of his neck. That was crazy back there. You saved a whole bus. Peter shrugged. You got punched through a wall and got up. That's also crazy. Mark's mouth tightened. That happens. Peter stared at him for a moment. It shouldn't. Mark didn't answer. Peter stood and started checking his suit. Small tears. Burned webbing. Empty cartridge slots. He tried not to think about how hard it would be to make web fluid here. Mark watched him. Are you going to stay? Peter paused. He didn't know. He could be trapped here. The portal might never open again. Or it might open tomorrow and swallow someone else. Peter's stomach twisted. I'm going to help, Peter said finally. That's what I do, until I find a way home, and until I make sure whatever dragged me here doesn't drag anyone else. Mark nodded slowly. Cecil says you're a variable. Peter looked at him. Cecil says a lot of things. Mark hesitated, then said quietly, My dad. He was watching you. Peter's spider sense didn't flare, but something inside him tightened anyway. Yeah, Peter said. Careful. I noticed. Mark's voice dropped. He doesn't watch people unless he thinks they matter. Peter forced a small joke. Great. I always wanted to matter to someone who looks like he could bench press a mountain. Mark didn't laugh this time. He looked worried. Peter's humor faded. Mark, listen to me. I don't know your world yet, but I know this feeling. Mark's eyes flicked up. It's the feeling when someone strong is around, Peter said, and you're trying to decide if they're safe. Mark swallowed. Peter didn't push it further. He didn't know enough yet, but he filed it away. A new sound cut through the building, not an alarm, more like a deep vibration, like the air itself was being pulled. Peter's spider sense shot up so hard he almost stumbled. He turned toward the door. Mark's face changed too. What is that? Peter asked. Mark's voice went tight. That's not normal. The camera in Peter's room tilted slightly, like it was listening. Far away, in the city, something tore open again. And this time, it felt like it knew exactly where to aim. The second Flaxan portal did not open in the street. It opened above the river, like someone wanted a clear line into the city. Peter saw it on a screen first, in a small operations room Cecil shoved them into with no time for warm-ups. Cecil's voice came through Mark's earpiece, and Mark repeated it out loud for Peter. They're back. Bigger force. Different tech. They're not just raiding. They're testing. Peter watched the live drone feed. The portal glowed bright. Then soldiers dropped out like falling stones. They hit the water, then shot up with jets on their backs. Some carried weapons. Some carried devices that looked like metal cubes. Peter's skin crawled. "Why do I feel like those cubes are bad?" Peter asked. Mark's jaw clenched. "Because everything they bring is bad." Peter pointed at the screen. "Also, you have a very specific alien enemy. That's comforting." Mark shot him a look. "It's not comforting." Cecil's voice cut in through the speaker. "Spider-Man. You will assist Invincible and the Guardians team. Priority is civilian survival. Secondary is stopping the devices." Peter blinked once. "Wow. We agree on something." There was a tiny pause on the line, like Cecil hated that. "Move," Cecil said. They launched fast. Mark flew. Peter did not. Peter grabbed a harness Cecil's team offered, glanced at it, then shook his head. "No thanks. I have my own travel plan." He ran straight out of the facility, leapt off the nearest ledge, and fired a web line toward a distant building. The web stuck. Peter swung. The city rushed under him. A different city, different streets, different skyline. Same screams. As he swung, he tried to count his web shots in his head. He had to. If he ran out, he'd be a guy in pajamas falling out of the sky. "Okay," he muttered. "New rule. No wasting webs on dramatic entrances." Mark shot past him in the air, a blue and yellow streak. Peter called up, "Hey, if you see a giant mustache missile, tell him to aim away from people." Mark glanced down mid-flight. "What?" Peter pointed vaguely upward. "Your dad." Mark didn't answer. He flew faster. Peter's spider sense started buzzing in patterns now. Not just danger. Direction. It tugged his attention toward the river. He swung low over traffic and saw it. Flaxon troops had landed on both sides of the riverbank. They were setting the metal cubes into place, spacing them out like anchors. Peter's brain clicked. Those are stabilizers. He didn't know why he knew. He just did. Portals needed structure. If they anchored their doorway, they could keep it open longer. Bring more troops. Bring bigger weapons. Peter swung in and landed on a streetlight pole, crouched like a coiled spring. Below, civilians were running. Some froze when they saw the aliens. Some tried to film. A bad choice in a world like this. Peter whispered, "Please don't be brave. Please just run." He dropped. He landed behind a flaxen soldier and webbed its rifle to its chest before it could turn. Then he kicked the back of its knee and yanked its head down with a web line. It crashed face first. Peter shot a web at the nearest cube device and tried to rip it up. It didn't move. It was heavier than it looked, or locked into the ground. Peter's spider sense flared. He flipped away just as an energy blast cracked the pavement where his head had been. "Hi," Peter called, voice bright, as he swung around a tree. "I'm going to need you guys to stop with the invading thing." A flaxen squad raised weapons. Peter's spider sense danced. He moved between shots like he was slipping between raindrops. He webbed barrels, glued boots, and tied arms together. But there were too many. Mark slammed into the riverbank like a comet, punching 2 flaxans away in one hit. He hovered, breathing hard, eyes locked on the devices. "What are they building?" "Portal anchors," Peter shouted, firing webs at another cube. "We break them. We close the door." Mark nodded and grabbed one cube with both hands. He yanked. The cube tore free with a grind, and the ground cracked. Peter blinked. "Okay, you can just do that." Mark huffed. "Yeah." Flaxens charged. Mark met them with fists. Peter met them with webs and movement. For a moment, they worked well together. Mark hit hard and drew attention. Peter cleared civilians and disarmed troops. Mark broke cubes. Peter kept Mark from getting blindsided, shouting warnings when Spider Sense saw something Mark couldn't. "Left," Peter yelled. Mark twisted. A flaxon heavy slammed into where his ribs had been. Mark's eyes widened. "How did you—" "No time," Peter shouted again, because that kept being true. A device at the river's edge pulsed bright. Peter's spider sense screamed. He turned and saw the cube's surface shift, like it was changing shape, adapting. It released a burst of energy that snapped Peter's webbing right off it. The web strings peeled away like they had never been sticky. Peter's stomach sank. Oh no. The Flaxens weren't just anchoring the portal. They were learning. A bigger shape rose from the portal's mouth above the river. Not a ship, not a normal troop. A heavy unit, taller and broader than the one from the first raid. Its armor looked thicker. Its weapon looked meaner. Its eyes scanned the battlefield like it was searching for one specific problem. Then its gaze landed on the webbing all over the ground. It pointed at Peter. Peter's spider sense screamed so hard it felt like a siren in his skull. Peter whispered, "Yep, that's me. I'm the problem." It charged. Not at Mark, at Peter. Peter shot upward on a web line, trying to pull the fight away from civilians. The heavy followed, leaping in huge bounds, ripping street signs out of the ground to throw. One sign spun toward a running family. Peter snapped a web line, caught the sign in midair, and yanked it off course into an empty car. The car crumpled. He landed on a wall, clinging sideways, eyes locked on the heavy. Mark flew in, fists up. "I've got it." "No," Peter shouted. "Break more cubes, close the portal." Mark hesitated, torn. The heavy took that chance and slammed Mark with a backhand. Mark flew across the riverbank and crashed into a concrete barrier. Peter's heart jumped. He forced himself not to run to Mark. If he ran to Mark, the portal stayed open. If the portal stayed open, more people died. Peter fired webs at the heavy's face, trying to blind it. The heavy tore through the webbing and kept coming. Peter flipped over its head, landed on its back, and tried to web its joints tight. The heavy's armor shifted again. The webbing slid off. Peter's breath caught. It's changing its surface. The heavy grabbed Peter by the ankle. Peter's stomach lurched as he got yanked through the air like a toy. He twisted, shot a web line to a building, and went taut, stopping himself from being smashed into the ground. His arms screamed as he caught his own momentum. The heavy yanked again, and the web line snapped. Peter fell. His spider sense screamed. He twisted midair and landed in a three-point crouch, but the shock still rattled his bones. He looked up. The heavy raised its weapon and fired a beam that carved the street in a straight line toward Peter and a group of civilians behind him. Peter's eyes widened. He didn't have time to move everyone, so he did the only thing he could. He jumped into the line. He fired webs left and right, making a thick web wall in front of the beam's path. The beam hit the webbing. For a split second, Peter thought the webbing would burn through and everyone would die anyway. Instead, the webbing held barely. It smoked. It shook. It stretched like a net catching a falling car. Peter gritted his teeth and pushed, adding more layers. His cartridges clicked, emptying fast. The beam stopped. Peter panted, staring at his own hands like they had betrayed him. He had used too much web. He glanced at his belt. 2 cartridges left. "Perfect," he whispered. "Love that from me." Behind him, the civilians stared. A little girl clutched her dad's shirt and whispered, "Are you okay?" Peter forced a smile through his mask. "I'm great. I'm totally great. Just stay behind me." He turned back to the heavy. The heavy unit advanced again, slow now, like it knew it had him. Peter's spider sense pulsed with another warning. Not from the heavy. From above, a shadow fell across the riverbank. Omni-Man dropped down like a meteor, cracking concrete as he landed between Peter and the heavy. Peter froze, breathing hard. Omni-Man looked at the heavy like it was an insect. The heavy fired its beam. Omni-Man stepped forward and took it to the chest. The beam pushed at his suit. It made light flare. Omni-Man did not move. He grabbed the heavy's weapon with one hand and crushed it. Metal folded. Sparks flew. Peter's mouth went dry. Omni-Man seized the heavy by the throat and lifted it off the ground. The heavy kicked and clawed. Omni-Man's voice was calm. "You're adapting." The heavy made a choking sound. Omni-Man's eyes flicked to Peter for half a second, like he wanted Peter to understand what was about to happen. Peter's spider sense screamed again. Not danger. Warning. Peter stepped forward, hands out. "Wait." Omni-Man slammed the heavy through the ground. The impact shook the riverbank. Concrete cracked like thin ice. Peter flinched. He hated the clean ease of it. The way Omni-Man ended a problem like he was wiping dust off a shelf. The flaxen soldiers froze. Then they panicked. They grabbed their cube devices and pulled back toward the portal. Mark pushed himself out of the barrier, eyes wide, bruised, angry. He flew toward the portal, fists clenched. "They're getting away." Cecil's voice crackled in Mark's ear. "Let them go. The portal is the priority." Peter heard it through Mark's speaker. Peter looked up at the portal. It shimmered. The cube anchors pulsed. The doorway stayed open. More shapes moved inside it. Not soldiers this time. Something bigger. Peter's spider sense turned into a scream that wouldn't stop. He looked at Mark. Mark looked back. Mark's eyes said, "We can't handle whatever that is." Peter's body wanted to run toward it anyway. Omni-Man stepped forward without hesitation, like fear wasn't a real thing. Peter forced himself to think. He didn't need to win. He needed to close the door. Peter sprinted toward the nearest anchor cube, the one Mark had not ripped out yet. He dropped to one knee, yanked out his last good cartridge, and fired webbing into the seams and vents of the cube, trying to jam it from the inside. The cube's surface started to shift, trying to shake the web off. Peter leaned in and shoved his whole arm against it, forcing the webbing deeper. His muscles shook, his shoulder burned. "Come on," he hissed. "Come on." Mark flew down and grabbed the cube from the other side. "What do you need?" "Rip it out," Peter shouted. "Now." Mark yanked. The cube came free with a harsh snap, like pulling a tooth out of concrete. The portal above the river flickered. The other cubes pulsed brighter, trying to compensate. Peter's spider sense screamed at the second cube. He pointed. "That one." Mark shot to it and tore it free too. The portal shuddered like a dying light. Inside it, the bigger shape moved closer, like it was trying to rush through before the door shut. Omni-Man flew upward, toward the portal, fists ready. Peter shouted without thinking, "Don't go in there." Omni-Man didn't look back. He didn't need to. Mark hesitated. Peter's spider sense buzzed at Mark now, like it was begging him to stay on this side. Mark's face twisted, then he made a choice. He stayed. He tore out the last anchor cube. The portal snapped shut like a slammed door. The air went still. The riverbank was a mess. Smoke, broken concrete, dropped weapons, people crying. Peter's legs went weak. He sat back on the ground for half a second, breathing hard. His belt felt light. His webs were almost gone. Mark landed beside him, chest rising fast. "You were right," Mark said quietly. Peter looked up at him. "About what?" Mark's face was serious. "Saving people first. Closing the door. Not chasing a fight just because it's there." Peter's throat tightened. He wanted to say something wise. Instead, he said, "Yeah, it's a pretty good rule. I stole it from an old guy." Mark almost smiled. Then Cecil's voice came through again, cold as ever. "Good work. Now listen carefully. Our sensors detected something during the portal flicker." Peter pushed himself to his feet, tense. What kind of something? Cecil's pause was small, but Peter felt it anyway. "Anomaly resonance," Cecil said. "A signature that matches the first event that brought you here." Peter's stomach dropped. So it wasn't random. It never was. Mark looked at Peter, eyes wide. "They were reacting to you?" Peter swallowed. "Or aiming at me." High above, Omni-Man hovered alone in the sky, staring at the empty space where the portal had been. He looked satisfied, like this proved something. Peter stared up too, and his spider sense gave one last quiet pulse. Not panic, not a scream, just a steady warning that told him the truth in the simplest way. Someone had opened the door once. Someone would try to open it again. And now everyone in this world knew the webbed stranger mattered. The cleanup started before the smoke even finished rising. Black helicopters circled over the river. Trucks rolled in. Men in dark gear moved fast and quiet, like the street was a place they owned. They picked up broken alien rifles with thick gloves. They dropped pieces into metal boxes that locked with a hard click. They sprayed foam over holes in the pavement like they could erase what happened. Peter stood on the edge of the mess with Mark and watched the erase part fail. You could patch concrete, you could sweep glass, but you could not unscream people. A woman hugged her son so tight the kid looked annoyed, then scared again, then calm. A man sat on the curb holding his wrist and staring into space. 2 EMTs loaded someone onto a stretcher. The stretcher had a red stain that didn't belong there. Peter's hands curled into fists. He didn't like this world's normal. Mark hovered beside him, low to the ground now. No dramatic floating, just a tired kid with bruises. "You did good," Mark said. Peter didn't answer right away. He kept staring at the blood on the stretcher. "I did what I could," Peter said finally. Mark's voice got smaller. "That's all we can do." Peter looked at him. "Is that what they tell you?" Mark frowned. "Who?" Peter nodded toward the GDA crews. "The people with badges and secrets." Mark's jaw tightened. "Cecil saves the world." Peter let out a short breath that was almost a laugh, but not a happy one. "Yeah, that's what they all say." A drone drifted closer, its lens aimed at Peter's mask like it was hungry. Peter lifted 2 fingers and tapped the lens lightly. "Hi, please don't zoom into my pores." The drone didn't react. Mark's communicator beeped. He put a hand to his ear. "Cecil?" Peter heard Cecil's voice through the speaker, calm and sharp. "Both of you. Debrief. Now." Mark's shoulders sank. "We're going." Peter glanced once more at the civilians. He wanted to stay. He wanted to help carry people. He wanted to fix everything himself, because that's what Spider-Man always tried to do. But this wasn't his city, and the men with guns weren't going to let him just help. So Peter followed Mark. He hated that too. Cecil Stedman didn't waste time pretending this was friendly. He spoke from behind thick glass again, sitting in the same clean room, with the same flat expression. Robot stood near a wall, hands behind his back, eyes moving like a scanner. Peter sat in a chair and forced his body to relax. His spider sense buzzed softly the whole time, like it didn't trust any of this. On a screen, the portal flicker replayed from 10 angles. Cecil tapped the screen. That signature matched the first event, the one that dropped you into my city. Peter's throat tightened. So it wasn't random. "No," Cecil said. "It was either aimed or it was attracted." Robot's head tilted slightly. "Your presence could act like a beacon." Peter pointed at Robot. "I did not sign up to be a beacon." Cecil's voice didn't change. "You don't get to sign up. Reality doesn't ask permission." Mark stood off to the side, arms crossed, trying to look tough. He looked more annoyed than tough. His cheek had a bruise that spread like spilled ink. Peter nodded at Mark. "Your face okay?" Mark shrugged. "I've had worse." Peter looked back at Cecil. "So what now?" Cecil leaned forward. "Now you operate with us. You follow directives. You stay within range of our monitoring. We keep you supplied. We keep you informed. We keep you from becoming a problem." Peter's eyes narrowed behind the mask. "And if I don't want to be kept?" Cecil didn't blink. "Then you're an unknown superhuman in my country, in a world that already has enough unknown superhumans, and I do not allow unknowns to roam." Peter's spider sense buzzed harder at that word. "Allow." Peter leaned back. "I'm not a dog." Cecil's mouth twitched, like it wanted to become a smile, and refused. "No. You're a weapon that thinks it's a person." Peter's voice dropped. "I am a person." Mark shifted, uncomfortable. "Cecil." Cecil lifted a hand without looking at him. "Mark." "Quiet." Mark clenched his jaw and stayed quiet. Robot stepped forward 1 pace. "Your web compound is unlike any adhesive we have cataloged. It sets instantly, holds at high tensile strength, and dissolves on a timer. That indicates controlled chemistry. If I can study it—" "No," Peter said immediately. Robot paused. "You didn't let me finish." "I don't need you to finish," Peter said. "I've heard the speech before. For the greater good. For safety. For science. Then someone steals it, sells it, or uses it to hurt people." Robot's expression didn't change, but his tone sharpened by half a degree. I would secure it. Peter pointed at the screen, showing a city street full of broken glass. You secure a lot of things. People still bleed. Cecil's voice cut in. You want to help? Then accept structure. Peter stared at the glass wall between them. It felt like the whole world was behind that glass, telling him where to stand. Peter breathed in, slow. He forced himself to speak like an adult, not a scared kid in a mask. I will work with you, Peter said. In emergencies, when people are in danger. But I am not taking orders that make me hurt innocent people. I am not killing. I am not disappearing people. I said it before. Cecil's eyes went colder. In this world, hesitation gets people killed. Peter's voice stayed steady. In my world, giving up gets people killed. Silence. Robot's eyes moved to Peter's belt. Your cartridges are low again. Peter's shoulders sagged. Yes, thank you. My pants are judging me too. Cecil nodded once. We'll give you lab access. Limited. You'll have a handler present. Peter's stomach tightened. Robot. Robot didn't deny it. Peter exhaled sharply. Fantastic. My favorite kind of roommate. The kind that doesn't blink and wants my stuff. Cecil ignored the joke. One more thing. You will be on camera. Peter looked at the ceiling. I already noticed. You will also be tracked, Cecil said. Peter leaned forward. No. Cecil held his gaze through the glass. You don't get… Peter cut him off, voice firm. I'm cooperating. That's a choice. Tracking me without consent isn't cooperation. It's a leash. Cecil stared. Mark's eyes widened like he couldn't believe Peter was pushing this hard. Robot spoke calmly. A tracker is logical. You are an unknown variable. Peter looked at Robot. I have a name. Robot tilted his head. Which you are not sharing. Peter didn't answer. Cecil's voice softened by the smallest amount, like he was changing tactics. Then give me something. A compromise. Peter thought fast. He hated being watched, but he also knew what it looked like from Cecil's side. A stranger falls from a portal, fights like a nightmare, won't show his face, won't share his name, won't join any system. Peter nodded once. A communicator, like Mark's. I keep it on. I answer in emergencies. You can call me. You can't tag me. Cecil looked like he wanted to argue. Then he didn't. Fine, Cecil said. For now. Peter didn't like for now, but he took the win. Cecil leaned back. You'll go public as a registered hero. Peter blinked. No. Cecil's eyes narrowed. Why? Peter's voice got quiet. Because I have people I care about. And if the wrong person learns who I am, they get hurt. Mark's posture softened. He understood that part. Cecil studied Peter for a long moment. In this world, secrets rot. Peter replied, simple. In every world, some secrets protect. Cecil tapped the table. You'll be assigned temporary housing, a workspace. Mark will be your field contact. Mark groaned. I'm not his babysitter. Peter looked at Mark. We can call it two heroes who keep each other alive. Sounds nicer. Mark rolled his eyes, but the edge of his mouth moved like he almost smiled. Cecil's voice turned sharp again. Debrief over. Spider-Man, you're dismissed. Peter stood. Great. I'll go rebuild my entire life in a new universe. No big deal. As he walked out, Robot's calm voice followed him. I will get that formula eventually, Robot said, like he was talking about weather. Peter paused at the door and glanced back. Try, Peter said. Then he left before his spider sense could convince him to punch a wall. That night, the city learned Spider-Man's name without learning his name. The news anchors didn't know what to call him, so they said the webbed vigilante, and the masked hero, and the spider-themed super. A shaky video of Peter stopping the bus played on loop. Someone slowed it down and drew circles around his head like it was a UFO sighting. Someone else made a dumb edit where they added sound effects that didn't match anything. Peter watched it from a small room inside a GDA building, sitting on a bed that felt too stiff. The camera in the corner watched him watch himself. He didn't know what felt worse, being watched or seeing the world turn trauma into a clip. He turned the screen off. He pulled his suit onto the desk and started fixing it with a tiny repair kit Cecil's people had provided. Thread, patch material, a small heat tool. It wasn't perfect. It was better than nothing. His web shooters sat beside the suit like tired metal insects. He opened one and stared at the empty space where fluid should be. He whispered, "Okay. First problem. Webs." A soft knock came at the door. Peter's spider sense buzzed. Not danger, just awareness. The door opened. Mark stepped in, wearing normal clothes now. Hoodie, jeans, trying to look like a regular teenager in a very not regular life. He held a paper bag. "I brought you something." Peter stared at the bag. "If it's a tracker, I'm going to throw it out the window." Mark frowned. "It's not a tracker. It's, clothes. My mom said you probably don't have any." Peter's chest tightened at the word mom. He took the bag slowly. "Tell your mom. Thank you." Mark nodded, awkward. "She thinks you're my age." Peter almost laughed. "How old do you think I am?" Mark shrugged. 17? 18? Peter paused. "Okay. Wow. I'm flattered. I'm also deeply offended, but flattered." Mark blinked. "So, you're older than you," Peter said quickly. "Not by a lot, but enough to know this conversation is a trap." Mark's face went red. "I wasn't." Peter waved it off. "You're fine. It's just weird being here." Mark sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the suit pieces. "Robot says your web stuff is running out." Peter pointed at the empty cartridge. "Robot has eyes. Great job, Robot." Mark hesitated. "Why do you need it? You're strong. You can punch." Peter's head snapped toward him. Not angry, just serious. "No," Peter said. Mark frowned. "No?" Peter leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I'm not built like your dad. I'm not even built like you. I fight with movement. I fight with control. Webs are how I stop people without breaking them." Mark's eyes flickered. "Breaking them?" Peter's voice got quiet. "You hit someone hard enough, bones turn into dust. You don't always mean it. It still happens." Mark looked down at his hands. Peter softened his tone. "I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you why I do it my way." Mark swallowed. "Sometimes it feels like my way is the only way that works." Peter nodded once. "I know that feeling." A beat passed. Mark asked, "Careful. Do you ever want to stop?" Peter's throat tightened. He thought of Aunt May, of bills, of missed classes, of friends who didn't understand, of nights where he lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and wondered if being Spider-Man was ruining everything. He forced a small smile under the mask, all the time. Mark's eyes widened. "Then why don't you?" Peter tapped the suit gently. "Because the moment I stop, someone else gets hurt, and I can't live with that." Mark's shoulders sank like the truth weighed a lot. Peter glanced at Mark's bruises. "You should ice your face." Mark scoffed. "I'm fine." Peter stood and tossed the paper bag onto the bed. "I am going to pretend this is a normal sleepover, and you're the friend who won't stop talking about aliens." Mark actually smiled now. "They are aliens." Peter nodded. "And I am the friend who won't stop talking about glue." Mark chuckled, then the sound died quickly, like he remembered the world again. Before Mark left, he paused at the door. "My dad thinks you're interesting." Peter's spider sense buzzed again, low and ugly. Peter nodded slowly. "Yeah." Mark's voice dropped. "That's not always a good thing." Peter didn't disagree. "Tell me something, Mark. When your dad looks at people, does it ever feel like he's measuring them?" Mark froze. Peter didn't push harder. He just let the question sit there like a pebble in a shoe. Mark finally nodded once, small. Then he left. Peter stared at the closed door for a long time. He whispered, "Great. The strongest man in the world is curious about me." He looked at his empty web cartridge again. "And I'm running out of glue. Across the city, Nolan Grayson stood on a rooftop and watched the news on a giant screen through a window. A clip played of Spider-Man pulling a bus to safety. A different clip showed him dodging blasts in a way that didn't make sense. Debbie sat on the couch inside, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He's just a kid. Nolan didn't look away from the screen. He's not from here. Debbie leaned forward. So what? He helped people. Nolan's voice stayed calm. Many things can help people. That does not mean they should be trusted. Debbie looked at him, frustrated. You say that about everyone. Nolan finally turned his head slightly. No, I don't. Debbie stared at him, trying to read his face. Mark likes him. Nolan's eyes narrowed a fraction. Mark is naive. Debbie's voice sharpened. Mark is your son. Nolan's expression didn't change. Which is why I won't allow something unstable to influence him. Debbie's mouth opened, then closed. She looked tired. You talk like he's a soldier. Nolan's gaze returned to the screen. Spider-Man swung past a burning car, pulling a person out with a web line. He behaves with restraint, Nolan said. Debbie's face softened a little. That's good. Nolan's voice stayed flat. It's inefficient. Debbie stared at him like she didn't know what to say. You're scaring me. Nolan finally looked at her fully. You don't need to be scared. Debbie whispered. That's what you always say. Nolan didn't answer. Outside, the clip ended with Spider-Man turning toward the camera and waving, like he could feel eyes on him. Nolan watched that wave. And for the first time in a long time, Nolan felt something like curiosity sharpen into a plan. In a hidden space far from any news camera, Angstrom Levy watched the same clips with a different hunger. The screens around him weren't normal. Some showed footage from this Earth. Some showed different cities, different skies, different versions of the same street corner, like the world was a deck of cards, and he could peek at more than one. Angstrom leaned closer. That portal signature, he whispered. That tear. He rewound the moment Peter got yanked through the sky. The rip opened. The webbed figure spun. The tear grabbed him. Angstrom's eyes gleamed. It wasn't clean. He tapped his temple, smiling slowly. It was sloppy. It was forced. His hands trembled with excitement. Someone had opened a door between worlds badly. And someone had fallen through. Angstrom leaned back, breathing faster now. A hero, he murmured. A hero who doesn't belong. A hero who still believes in rules. He laughed once. Soft. Rules can be broken, Angstrom whispered. And heroes can be tested. He raised one hand. The air in front of him shimmered. A small portal, the size of a dinner plate, opened with a quiet snap. Angstrom peered through. On the other side, he saw a clean hallway. Bright lights, a camera in the corner, a door with a simple lock. A GDA door. Angstrom's smile widened. Found you, he said. The attack came 2 days later. Peter was in his limited lab access workspace, which meant a small room with a desk, a sink, and exactly 4 cabinets Robot had already labeled with little printed tags. Peter didn't touch the tags. It felt like letting Robot win. He was mixing chemicals in a glass tube, trying to rebuild the web fluid formula from memory. It was hard without his normal supplies. The brands were different. The purity was different. Even the temperature in the room mattered. He stirred slowly, tongue pressed to the inside of his cheek in focus. Robot stood behind him, silent. Peter didn't turn around. If you breathe too close to my mixture, I will cry. Robot's voice stayed even. You are using a polymer base and an accelerant. Peter's shoulders tightened. Stop watching. I am monitoring for safety, Robot said. Peter snorted. Sure. He set the tube into a small holder and reached for another bottle. That's when his spider sense fired like a lightning strike. Not from the doorway. Not from Robot. From the wall. Peter spun. The wall behind the cabinets shimmered. A circle appeared out of nowhere, like someone cut a hole into reality. Peter's blood went cold. A portal. It was small, but it was real. Something pushed through it. A gloved hand. Then another. Then a big head with a wide grin. One of the Mahler twins crawled out like a rat through a vent. Peter's mouth fell open. Okay, we are absolutely not doing this right now. Robots' drones lifted instantly. Alarms started to blare, late, like they were embarrassed. The Mauler twin stood up and rolled his shoulders. Ah, so this is where they keep the fun toys. A second portal snapped open beside the first. The other Mauler crawled out. Peter's spider sense screamed again. He looked at the portals, at their clean edges, at the way they stayed open without any visible machine. That wasn't flaxand tech. That was something else. The Maulers cracked their knuckles. Robots' drones aimed weapons. "You are trespassing in a secure facility." One Mauler laughed. "No kidding." Peter stepped forward, palms up, trying to keep this from becoming a bloodbath. "Okay, guys. Blue, buff, angry, love the theme. But breaking into a government lab is usually a bad idea." The Mauler pointed at Peter's web shooters. "We want those." Peter blinked. "You want my no?" The Mauler nodded like he expected that. "We also want whatever data Cecil's hiding. Portal stuff, alien stuff, all of it." Peter's stomach tightened. Robot's voice turned colder. "You will be detained." The Maulers moved. Fast. They weren't Viltrumite fast, but they were strong and trained and built like tanks. One Mauler lunged at Robot's drones, swatting two out of the air like they were flies. The other charged Peter. Peter's spider sense yanked him sideways before the fist arrived. The punch shattered the edge of the desk. Peter flipped over the Mauler's shoulder, landed behind him, and fired webs at his wrists. The Mauler ripped the webs and turned, grinning wider. Good. Finally. A challenge that isn't a flying brick. Peter's heart thumped. Flying brick. Yeah, that sounded like this world. Peter fired more webs, aiming for the Mauler's eyes, then his ankles, then the floor under him. The Mauler tore free, but it slowed him for half a second. That half second was enough for Peter to spring off the wall, kick the Mauler in the side of the head, and land on the ceiling. Peter clung upside down and shouted, "We can talk about this. We can do the whole, 'Why are you like this' thing." The Mauler swung at the air, missing. "We're like this because we're smarter than everyone else." Peter sighed. "I walked right into that." Robots' drones fired stun blasts. One Mauler took a hit to the chest and barely flinched. The Mauler laughed. Cute. He grabbed the drone and crushed it. Peter's spider sense screamed again. The second Mauler had moved toward the cabinets, toward the web fluid. Peter's eyes widened. "Oh no, you don't." He dropped from the ceiling, swung a web line, and yanked the cabinet doors shut with thick webbing. The Mauler ripped the doors off anyway, metal screeching. Peter shot a web at the Mauler's neck and pulled hard, trying to yank him off balance. The Mauler planted his feet and didn't move. Peter felt the pull in his shoulders. He's heavy. He's strong. Peter switched tactics instantly. He let the web line go slack, then snapped it to the floor, gluing the Mauler's boots down. The Mauler looked down, annoyed. Peter used that second to web the Mauler's hands together. The Mauler growled and tore. Peter's webbing held for a heartbeat, then snapped. Peter's belt felt light. His cartridge count was already dropping. He glanced toward Robot. Robot was fighting too, but it was clinical. Drones. Angles. Calculations. This wasn't hero work. This was defense. Then Peter's spider sense flared with a different kind of warning. Not a punch. Not a blast. A shift. The portals behind the Maulers trembled, like someone was watching through them. Peter's eyes flicked to the shimmering circles. For the briefest moment, he saw a face on the other side. A man with wide eyes and a smile that didn't feel friendly. Peter's stomach dropped. The face vanished. The portal snapped shut. The Mauler nearest the cabinets grabbed a metal case and shoved it under his arm. Got enough. Peter lunged. Put it back. The Mauler punched him in the chest. Peter flew backward into a cabinet. Glass shattered. Chemical smell hit his nose. Peter's head rang. He forced himself up. Robot's voice cut in, sharp. Security teams arriving in 12 seconds. The Mauler laughed. Then we'll leave in 10. A portal snapped open again, right behind them, like someone had been waiting for that line. Peter's eyes widened. That's not you. The Mauler glanced at the portal, surprised for the first time. Huh, that's not us. The portal held anyway. The Maulers didn't question good luck. They jumped through. Peter fired a web at the case under the Mauler's arm. The web stuck. Peter yanked with all his strength. For a second, the case slid toward him. Then the Mauler pulled back harder, and the web snapped like thread. The portal closed. The room fell into broken silence. GDA agents rushed in with rifles raised. Peter stood in the center of the wrecked lab, chest heaving, staring at the spot where the portal had been. Robot's remaining drones hovered close, their lenses focused on Peter now. Cecil's voice crackled over a speaker. "Report." Robot answered first. "Mauler twins. They stole a case with chemical compounds and partial portal data. They exited through an unknown portal." Peter's hands curled into fists. "Someone opened that door for them." Cecil's voice stayed calm. "You're sure?" Peter's voice went tight. "I saw a face." A pause. Cecil said, "Describe it." Peter swallowed. "Male, human, wide eyes, smiling like he was enjoying this." Cecil didn't answer for a beat. Then he said very quietly, "Get Spider-Man to debrief. Now." Peter looked at the ruined chemicals, at the broken glass, at the empty space where his web fluid could have been. His gag wasn't funny anymore. His resources were running out. And someone had just proven they could reach him anywhere. Peter turned toward the agents. "Tell Cecil I'm not his problem." The agents raised their rifles a fraction. Peter's spider sense buzzed. He lifted his hand slowly. "I'm still cooperating, but I'm done being surprised." He looked at Robot. "And you're not watching me sleep." Robot didn't blink. That was never my intention. Peter stared at him. "Sure." Then he walked out before anyone could stop him. Eve found him on a rooftop. Peter had swung there without thinking, just needing air. His web line felt thinner now, like every shot mattered more. He sat on the ledge with his feet hanging over the side, mask on, shoulders slumped. The city lights below looked pretty. The city itself didn't. A soft sound landed behind him. Peter's spider sense buzzed, but it didn't scream. He turned and saw a girl in a pink and white suit, floating a few inches above the roof like it was easy. Adam Eve. She held her hands up in a non-threatening way. "Mark said you might be up here." Peter stared at her. "Mark has a Spider-Man is sad radar now?" Eve's face softened. "He's worried. So am I." Peter looked away, embarrassed that he'd been found like this. "I'm fine." Eve didn't call him out. She just floated closer and sat on the roof itself, legs crossed, like she belonged there. "I saw the news," Eve said, "and I saw the lab footage." Peter's shoulders stiffened. "Cecil showed you?" Eve shook her head. "No, I have friends. This world leaks. It always leaks." Peter muttered, "Great." Eve looked at his belt. "You're low." Peter glanced down and sighed. "Yeah, that's the theme." Eve tilted her head. "You're trying to rebuild your web fluid, right?" Peter blinked. "How do you—" Eve gave him a small smile. "Mark talks. Also, you're not subtle. You smell like chemicals." Peter looked at his glove, sniffed it and groaned. "Fantastic. I'm a walking science fair." Eve held out a hand. A small chunk of metal on the roof lifted into the air and reshaped into a neat little container. Then another piece turned into a clean stirring rod. Then another turned into a simple lens. Peter stared. "Okay, that's very useful." Eve shrugged. "It's what I do." Peter hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Eve's expression went serious. "Because you saved people. Because you didn't have to. Because most people who land in this world don't stay kind for long." Peter's throat tightened. He looked away fast. Eve continued, gentle but firm. "And because Cecil is going to squeeze you until you pop, unless you have someone on your side." Peter's spider sense didn't scream, but his gut agreed. He nodded slowly. "Okay." Eve stood and held out her hand. "Come with me. I can't give you your old lab, but I can give you a safe space. For now." Peter looked at her hand. Then he took it. "All right," Peter said. "But if your safe space has a hidden camera, I'm moving to the moon." Eve smirked. "No cameras. Just don't ask whose apartment it is." Peter blinked. "Is it yours?" Eve's smirk widened. "No." Peter's eyes widened. Is it Mark's? Eve didn't answer. Peter groaned. Oh no. I'm the weird rooftop roommate. Eve laughed. And for a second, the world felt less sharp. Then Peter remembered the portal face, and the laugh died in his throat. The safe space was a small apartment that felt lived in, not controlled. Peter liked that. There was a couch with a blanket thrown over it, a shelf with random stuff, a lamp that flickered when you touched it, like it was broken but still trying. Eve pushed a pile of magazines aside and cleared a space on a table. Workbench. Peter set his web shooters down carefully, like they were fragile, because right now, they kind of were. He took out a notebook and started writing formulas from memory. Eve watched, curious. You remember all that? Peter shrugged. Science is my hobby and my curse. Eve leaned closer. You're a scientist? Peter hesitated. I'm trying to be. Back home. When I'm not doing this. Eve nodded slowly, like that made him make more sense. Peter sighed and tapped the table. I need certain chemicals, certain purity, certain ratios. If it's off, the web either won't hold or it'll never dissolve. Eve frowned. Never dissolve sounds bad. Peter nodded. Very bad. Accidentally glue someone forever is not on my list. Eve lifted a hand. A small pile of basic materials on the table shifted and turned into clean beakers. Peter stared. You can make lab gear. Eve shrugged. Simple stuff. I can't just make perfect chemicals out of nothing. It's complicated. Peter nodded. Everything is complicated. He tried mixing a small batch with what they had. The fluid came out too thin. He tried again. This time it gelled too fast and hardened like a rock, cracking the cartridge. Peter groaned and leaned back in the chair. Okay, that's not it. Eve tilted her head. Can you adjust? Peter rubbed his face through the mask. Yes, but I need better supplies, and I need time. A buzzing sound hit Peter's spider sense first, then his ears. Eve looked at her phone. Cecil's calling me. Peter froze. Why would Cecil call you? Eve's face tightened. Because he calls everyone. She answered, voice flat. Cecil. Cecil's voice came through the speaker, calm as always. Eve, we have a situation. Eve's eyes narrowed. What kind? Cecil said. A string of disappearances. And a pattern. Peter sat up slowly. Cecil continued. Cameras caught a masked figure near the last site. A webbed figure. Peter's stomach dropped. What? Eve's voice sharpened. That's not him. Cecil didn't sound convinced. Bring him in. Eve glanced at Peter. Peter's hands clenched. Eve said no. Cecil paused. Eve. Eve cut him off. If you want him, come get him yourself. Silence crackled on the line. Then Cecil's voice turned colder. Fine, but understand this. If civilians die because you protected an unknown, that's on you. Eve's jaw tightened. She ended the call. Peter stared at her. Disappearances? Eve nodded. Something's been taking people. Quietly. Fast. Peter's spider sense buzzed low, like it didn't like the word taking. Peter stood. We have to check. Eve looked at his belt. You're almost out. Peter forced a small joke. Yeah, but I still have the world's greatest superpower. Eve raised an eyebrow. Which is? Peter's voice went serious. Not quitting. Eve's expression softened. Then they moved. The last disappearance happened near a bus stop. Peter hated that it was a bus stop. He hated how it echoed his first day here. He and Eve arrived on a rooftop nearby. Mark met them there, breathing hard like he'd flown fast. Mark looked between them. Cecil's furious. Peter nodded. Cecil can take a number. Mark's eyes flicked to Peter's web shooters. Are you good? Peter shrugged. Define good. Eve cut in. Focus. People are missing. Mark's face tightened. Yeah, I know. They watched the street below. It looked normal. Too normal. A couple waited by the bus stop. A man scrolled on his phone. A woman held a grocery bag. A teen bounced a knee, impatient. Peter's spider sense buzzed faintly. He frowned. "Do you feel that?" Mark shook his head. "No." Eve's eyes narrowed. "I don't either." Peter's buzz grew stronger. He whispered, "Something's—" A shadow moved in the alley. Peter's spider sense screamed. He didn't think. He jumped. He shot a web and swung down, landing between the bus stop and the alley mouth. The couple waiting for the bus screamed and stumbled back. Peter held his hands up. "Sorry, safety moment." Then the alley exploded. Not with fire. With bodies. 3 figures rushed out, fast and heavy, like angry machines wearing human shapes. Their skin looked wrong, pale and stretched. Their eyes were dead. Their movements were sharp and stiff, like they were pulled by wires. Reanimen. Peter's stomach turned. One of them lunged at the nearest civilian. Peter shot a web to the civilian's waist and yanked them backward, out of reach. He pivoted and fired webs at the Reanimen's arms. The Reanimen didn't slow. It ripped through the webbing like it was paper. Peter's eyes widened. Okay, that's new. Mark dropped from above and slammed into one Reanimen with a punch that should have ended it. The Reanimen flew back, hit a wall, and stood up again. Mark stared, confused. "What the—" Eve's hands lifted. Pink energy shimmered around her fingers as she formed a barrier in front of the civilians. Peter shouted, "Get them out, now!" Eve nodded and guided the civilians behind her shield, moving them away from the bus stop. Peter turned back to the Reanimen. There were more. 6, maybe 8. They poured out of the alley in a wave. Peter's spider sense went wild. Too many angles, too many threats. He moved anyway. He ran up a wall, flipped over a grabbing hand, and landed behind one Reanimen. He tried a choke web, wrapping thick strands around its neck and shoulders, pulling tight. The Reanimen didn't react like it needed air. Peter's heart sank. "Okay," Peter muttered. "Not human. Not fully." A Reanimen swung at his head. Peter ducked. The fist smashed into the brick wall behind him and left a crater. Peter's eyes widened. "Oh, cool. Super strength plus 0 fear. That's my favorite." Mark flew in and grabbed 2 Reanimen at once, slamming them into the street. The pavement cracked. They still moved. Mark's face hardened. He started hitting harder. Peter saw where that road led. He shouted, "Mark, stop trying to win. Save people." Mark snapped back, angry. "They're not people." Peter's voice cut sharp. "They were." Mark froze for half a second. That half second saved him. A Reanimen jumped from behind and wrapped an arm around Mark's neck, trying to wrench. Mark grunted and threw it off. Peter shot a web and yanked the Reanimen's legs, making it fall. Peter landed on its back and pulled its arms behind it, webbing its wrists and elbows. The Reanimen fought like a machine, jerking with weird strength. Peter's webbing strained. His cartridge clicked. Low. Peter's chest tightened. He had to be careful now. Eve shouted from behind her barrier, "More coming." Peter glanced toward the alley. A bigger figure stepped out. A man in a coat. D.A. Sinclair. Peter had seen pictures. He recognized the quiet horror on the man's face, the calm eyes, the way he looked at the Reanimen like tools. Sinclair raised a device in his hand, like a remote. The Reanimen moved in tighter formation. Peter's blood ran cold. He's controlling them. Sinclair's gaze locked onto Peter's mask. He smiled slightly, like he'd found the exact thing he wanted. Peter's spider sense screamed. Sinclair spoke loudly, like he wanted Peter to hear. The webbed one. Capture him intact. Peter's voice went tight. Nope. He fired webs at Sinclair. Sinclair stepped back into the alley, out of sight. The webs slapped empty air. Peter cursed under his breath. The Reanimen surged again. Peter's mind raced. They didn't get tired. They didn't fear pain. They were strong enough to tear his webs. If he ran out, he'd be grabbed. Mark could punch forever, but if he lost control, he'd start breaking bodies. Eve could shield civilians, but she couldn't fight and shield everything at once. Peter made a choice. He yelled, "Mark, Push them away from the street. Drive them into the alley mouth. Mark hesitated. Why? Peter shouted. Because I can trap the entrance. Mark's eyes widened. He nodded. He flew low and hit the Reaniman like a bulldozer, not trying to destroy, just shove. He forced them back toward the alley. Peter sprinted toward a streetlight pole, shot a web up high, and swung in a tight circle, building speed. As he swung, he fired web lines in a pattern, fast and precise, anchoring to buildings, poles, and the ground. A web lattice formed across the alley mouth like a giant net. The Reaniman hit it. The webbing stretched, held, and wrapped around them. They tore at it, but the more they tore, the more strands caught their arms and legs. Peter landed hard, hands shaking, chest heaving. His last cartridge felt almost empty. Mark hovered beside him, breathing hard. That was smart. Peter didn't smile. He stared at the trapped Reaniman. They looked human enough that it hurt. One had a face that was almost normal, except the eyes were too empty. Peter whispered, "They were people." Mark's voice dropped. Sinclair did this. Eve floated closer. Barrier gone now that civilians had fled. Her face looked sick. "We have to stop him." Peter nodded. "Yes." A burst of gunfire rattled from somewhere above. GDA agents dropped onto rooftops. Cecil's voice came through a speaker drone. "Step away from the targets." Peter's shoulders tensed. "Cecil." "No." Cecil's voice stayed calm. "Those are hostile assets." Peter snapped. "They are victims." Cecil didn't raise his voice. "They are threats, and they will be neutralized." Peter stepped between the GDA agents and the trapped Reaniman, arms out. Mark's eyes widened. "Peter." Peter didn't look back. "Don't." Eve floated beside Peter, jaw tight, hands glowing faintly. Cecil's drone hovered closer. "Move." Peter's voice went low and dangerous. "If you shoot through me, that's on you." A long silence. The GDA agents didn't fire. For once, Cecil hesitated. Peter didn't relax. He kept his stance. He could feel sweat under his mask. Finally, Cecil spoke. "Fine, we'll contain them." Peter's chest loosened a fraction. Cecil continued. "Colder now. But you're coming in. Now." Peter stared at the drone. "No." Cecil's voice sharpened. "Yes." Peter's spider sense buzzed again. Not from Cecil. From the alley behind the trapped Reaniman, the air shimmered. A small portal opened, low to the ground. Peter's eyes widened. "Mark, Eve." Something snapped through the portal. Not a person. A device. It hit the alley floor and unfolded like a metal flower. Then it started humming. Peter's blood went cold. The trapped Reaniman jerked like they felt it too. Eve's eyes widened. "What is that?" Peter didn't know for sure, but his spider sense was screaming like it did near the Flaxan anchors. He shouted, "It's portal tech. Back up." Mark looked at the device. "Can we destroy it?" Peter's mind raced. If it was like the anchors, punching it might not work. If it was tuned wrong, breaking it might open something worse. He didn't have time. Peter sprinted forward, low to the ground, and dove onto the device. He slammed his hands onto it and fired the last of his webbing into its seams, jamming it like he'd jammed the cube. The device vibrated. Hot. Peter's arms shook. Eve floated closer, hands raised. "Peter, get off." Peter gritted his teeth. If it opens, people die. Mark moved in, fists clenched, ready to help. Peter shouted, "Don't punch it." Mark froze. Eve looked at Peter, terrified. "Then what do we do?" Peter's mind snapped to one idea. "Eve," he shouted. "Can you wrap it? Like, seal it? Encapsulate it?" Eve blinked. "I can try." "Do it," Peter yelled. Eve thrust her hands forward. Pink energy flared. Matter bent. The air around the device shimmered as Eve forced material into shape. A thick shell started forming around the portal device. The device fought back, humming louder. Peter felt heat climb into his palms. His spider sense screamed harder. The shell sealed tighter. The hum turned into a whine. Peter's teeth clenched. Then, the device's light flickered. The portal shimmered like a dying spark and snapped shut. Peter fell backward, panting, hands smoking slightly where the heat had scorched his gloves. Eve hovered, shaking, staring at the sealed shell on the ground like it might explode anyway. Mark stared at Peter like he'd just watched someone stop a train with their body. Cecil's drone hovered above them, silent. Peter forced himself to sit up. His web shooters clicked empty. He looked down at them, then up at the drone. He didn't hide the anger in his voice. Someone is playing games with portals. Cecil's voice was quiet. Yes. Peter swallowed. And they're using your city as the board. Cecil didn't deny it. Peter's stomach turned as he looked at the trapped reanimant again. Then he looked at the sealed portal device. And he knew the truth in his bones. The Maulers hadn't been the real point. Sinclair hadn't been the real point. This was bigger. Someone could open doors wherever they wanted. And they were learning how Peter moved when the doors opened. Peter pushed himself to his feet, chest tight. Mark stepped closer, voice low. Peter, what do we do? Peter stared at the sealed shell, then at the alley, then up at the night sky. He didn't have a plan yet, but he had a direction. He spoke simple and firm. We find the guy who's opening the doors. Eve nodded, eyes hard. And we stop him. Cecil's voice came through the drone, colder again. Or we capture him. Peter didn't look at the drone. Not if you're going to turn him into a weapon. Not if you're going to do what Sinclair did. Cecil was silent. Peter glanced at Mark. Mark's face looked like it was changing, like pieces were clicking into place. Mark whispered, "This is what you meant." Peter nodded once. Yeah. The night wind moved over the rooftops. Somewhere far away, a portal opened and closed like a blink. And Peter's spider sense answered with a steady, ugly warning. This wasn't over. It was just getting personal. 2 weeks passed, and the city stopped calling Spider-Man the new guy. They didn't trust him yet. They didn't understand him. But they pointed at the sky when they saw a red and blue blur swing past, and they ran the right way when he yelled. Peter learned the city's rhythm fast. It was like learning a song with missing notes. In the mornings, he worked in a safe workspace that Cecil approved. It was safer than the main GDA lab. It still had cameras he could feel even when he didn't look. In the afternoons, he patrolled with Mark sometimes, because Mark was trying, and because Peter didn't like being alone in a world where portals could open in a wall. At night, he fixed his suit again. The suit was losing the fight. Thread here was different. Glue here was different. Even the air felt different. The mask stayed the same, though. The mask was the one thing he could control. His web shooters were the bigger problem. Eve had helped him get close to his original formula, but close wasn't good enough when your whole style depended on it. Some batches were too sticky. Some batches were too weak. One time the web dissolved too fast, and Peter nearly face-planted off a building while swinging. He told Mark it was a surprise shortcut. Mark didn't laugh. Tonight, Peter sat at the little apartment table again, stirring a fresh mix with his shoulders hunched and his mind focused. Eve floated in place near the sink, arms folded. She watched him like she was trying to see the answer in the air. "Are you sure that's right?" she asked. Peter squinted at the beaker. "Nope." Eve blinked. "Then why are you doing it?" Peter shrugged. "Because if I wait until I'm sure, I'll never do anything. That's kind of my thing." Eve's mouth twitched. "That explains a lot." Peter tried to grin under the mask. "Thank you, I try." He poured the mixture into a cartridge. The cartridge hissed. It didn't crack. It didn't harden. It didn't explode. Peter held it up like it was a newborn baby. "Okay, that's something." Eve leaned closer. "Test it." Peter stood, walked to the wall, and fired a single web line. It shot out clean. It stuck to the wall with a soft thwip. Peter tugged. It held. His chest loosened in relief. He checked his watch. He didn't have a watch that worked in this universe. He still checked his wrist anyway, like the habit was glued on. "Good," Eve said softly. You needed that. Peter looked at the new cartridge in his hand. He did need that. He also needed something else, something that shouldn't matter and still did. He reached into his bag and pulled out a cheap little camera Eve had found secondhand. It wasn't his. It wasn't special. It didn't have the same feel. But it was a camera. He stared at it like it was a piece of home. Eve noticed. You really do the photo thing. Peter nodded. It's proof. For me. For other people. Sometimes for jobs. Eve frowned. Jobs? Peter waved a hand. Long story. Also not relevant because I can't even open a bank account here. Eve's eyes softened. You miss your life. Peter didn't answer right away. He finally said quiet. I miss the people in it. Eve didn't push. She just nodded once and let the silence exist. Then the silence broke. Peter's spider sense sparked, sharp and sudden, like a finger flicking the back of his neck. He froze. Eve saw it. What? Peter's head turned toward the window. Not because he heard something. Because he felt something. Outside, the city looked calm. Streetlights, a few cars. Nothing on fire. That didn't mean anything. Someone's here, Peter whispered. Eve lifted off the floor, hands glowing faintly. GDA? Peter shook his head slowly. No, this feels wrong. A knock hit the door. One knock, polite. Peter stared at it. Eve mouthed, Don't. Peter didn't move. He didn't answer. The knock came again. Then a voice spoke through the door, friendly like a neighbor. Peter Parker, it said. Peter went cold. Eve's eyes widened. What did he say? Peter's throat went tight. He forced his voice out. He said, My name. Eve's glow brightened. How would anyone… Peter didn't finish. Because the door wasn't opening. The wall beside it shimmered. A circle appeared. Neat and clean, like someone drew it with a compass. A portal. Peter's heart hammered. He stepped back, putting himself between Eve and the portal without thinking. The portal widened. A man stepped through, tall and thin, with wide eyes and a smile that tried to be friendly and failed. Angstrom Levy. Peter recognized the face from that brief moment in the lab, even though he'd only seen it for a blink. Angstrom lifted one hand like he was greeting an old friend. Hi. Peter's voice came out sharp. No. Angstrom blinked, amused. That's your first word to me? No, hello? No, who are you? Peter's spider sense buzzed like a trapped insect. You're the one opening doors, Peter said. Angstrom's smile grew. Yes. Eve floated higher, hands raised. You can't just break into… Angstrom looked at her like he'd forgotten she existed, then waved his hand lightly. A portal snapped open behind Eve. Eve jerked in surprise as the air pulled at her suit. Peter lunged. He fired a web line at Eve's ankle and yanked her forward, out of the pull, before the portal could take her. The portal closed with a quiet snap. Angstrom's eyebrows lifted. Fast, predictive, interesting. Peter's jaw clenched. Stop. Angstrom stepped closer, hands open. Relax. I didn't come to fight. Peter didn't relax. He moved his feet slightly, setting his stance. Eve hovered beside him now, tense. He knows your name. Peter didn't look away from Angstrom. How? Angstrom tapped his temple. I have access. Not like Cecil. Better. Cleaner. Peter's stomach turned. You went through my world. Angstrom's eyes gleamed. I went through many worlds. Eve snapped. Why? Angstrom's smile sharpened. Because I can. Because I should. Because the multiverse is full of people who think they're special, and I'm tired of watching them act like they own everything. Peter's spider sense buzzed again, and Peter realized the worst part. Angstrom was calm, like he wasn't scared of them at all. Peter spoke slowly. What do you want? Angstrom looked pleased, like Peter finally asked the right question. I want to offer you something, Angstrom said. A deal. Peter's chest tightened. No. Angstrom chuckled. You said that already. Try listening first. It might change your life. Peter didn't move. Angstrom gestured, and a portal opened behind him. Not to a hallway. not to a street. To a skyline Peter knew like he knew his own heartbeat. New York. Peter's breath caught. He saw familiar buildings, familiar lights, the angle of the streets, the shape of home. His throat went tight so fast it hurt. Angstrom's voice stayed gentle, like he was handing Peter a gift. There, you can go back. Eve whispered, shocked. Peter. Peter stared at the portal like it was a mirage, like if he blinked, it would vanish. He felt a pull in his chest that wasn't physics, it was need. Angstrom watched him closely. I can send you home right now. No more GDA. No more Omni-Man. No more blood in the streets. Just you. Your city. Your people. Peter swallowed hard. His spider sense buzzed. Not warning of danger. Warning of a trap. Peter forced his eyes away from the portal and back to Angstrom. What's the price? Angstrom's smile returned. Smart. He stepped closer. The price is simple. I want you to stop interfering. Peter frowned. With what? Angstrom spread his hands. With the corrections, with the lessons, with the cleaning. Eve's voice went cold. Cleaning what? Angstrom's eyes flicked to her. Cleaning lies. Peter's mind flashed to Omni-Man's calm face, to Mark's bruises, to Cecil's cold words, to this world's rotten secrets. Angstrom looked at Peter again. This earth is full of people playing God. Cecil plays God with files. Nolan plays God with strength. Robot plays God with plans. Peter's fists clenched. Angstrom's voice softened, like he was being reasonable. And you, Spider-Man, you're a good person. You try to save everyone. You want to fix everything. Peter stayed silent. Angstrom leaned in, smiling. You can't. Not here. Not against people like them. Peter's voice came out low. So you want me to walk away? Angstrom nodded, pleased. Yes. Let the world learn its truths. Let the strong face consequences. Let the multiverse settle into the shape it should have. Eve's hands glowed brighter. You're going to hurt people. Angstrom's smile didn't fade. People get hurt anyway. Peter felt anger climb, hot now. But the portal behind Angstrom still showed New York. His home was right there. Peter's body wanted to move toward it. Peter's heart wanted to move toward it. He didn't. He looked at Eve. She looked back, scared but steady. Peter looked at the apartment table. His new web cartridge sat there like a tiny promise. He looked back at Angstrom. You opened portals in a lab. You sent monsters to streets. People went missing. Angstrom tilted his head. Yes. Peter's voice sharpened. So don't pretend you're a teacher. You're a threat. Angstrom sighed like Peter disappointed him. You're going to say no. Peter didn't hesitate this time. No. Angstrom's smile vanished. For the first time, his eyes looked angry. Then you will stay here, and you will watch what happens. He raised both hands. Portals opened around the room in a ring, like windows in reality. Peter's spider sense exploded. He grabbed Eve's wrist. Hold on. A portal snapped open under their feet. Peter shot a web line to the ceiling. The web stuck. The floor vanished. Peter and Eve swung upward as the portal tried to eat them. They barely cleared it. Another portal opened in front of them, mid-air. Peter twisted, pulling Eve with him. They swung through open space and slammed into a wall that should have been solid but wasn't. They fell through. The world flipped, and suddenly they were outside. On a rooftop. Night wind in their faces. City noise below. Peter skidded, caught himself, and looked around fast. Angstrom stepped out of a portal nearby like he'd just taken a door from one room to another. He looked calm again. You chose the hard way, Angstrom said. Peter's voice shook with anger. Stop doing that. Angstrom shrugged. Make me. Then he vanished into another portal. Peter sprinted to the edge of the rooftop and looked down. Below, in the street, a portal opened, and something dropped out. Not a person. A reaniman. Then another. Then a third. People screamed. Peter's stomach dropped. Angstrom wasn't just threatening now. He was making a public disaster. Peter's spider sense tugged hard to the left. He turned and saw another portal open 3 blocks away. Flaxen soldiers spilled out this time, confused but armed. Peter whispered, "Oh no." Eve's face went pale. He's mixing threats. Peter's voice went tight. He's forcing a crisis. Another portal opened near a bridge. A portal opened near a school. Peter's blood went cold. He turned to Eve. "We have to split." Eve's hands trembled. "If we split, he can pick us off." Peter shook his head. "If we don't split, people die." Eve swallowed hard, then nodded. "Okay." Peter grabbed her shoulder. "Eve, listen. If you see Mark, tell him to save people first, not chase Angstrom." Eve nodded. "You too." Peter forced a small smile that didn't feel real. "I'm always saving people first. It's my whole annoying brand." Eve shot upward and flew toward the school portal, hands glowing. Peter leapt off the rooftop and swung toward the nearest screams. His web line pulled tight. For the first time in days, his cartridge worked exactly right. The web held. Peter swung lower, faster. He landed near the first Reaniman cluster. Civilians were running. A man tripped. A Reaniman lunged. Peter shot a web and yanked the man away, then slammed both feet into the Reaniman's chest. It flew back and hit a wall. It got up immediately. Peter didn't waste time trying to hurt it. He webbed its legs, pinned its arms, and pulled it into a streetlight pole, wrapping it tight like a cocoon. He moved to the next one. His spider sense screamed portal behind him. He spun, webbing already in his hand. A portal opened at shoulder height. A flaxen blast shot through it. Peter ducked by instinct. The blast hit a parked car and detonated it. Heat washed over Peter's back. Peter's teeth clenched. Angstrom. He fired a web into the portal's edge, like he could hook the door itself. The web stuck for half a second, then slid off as the portal surface shifted. The portal closed. Peter's spider sense buzzed again. Angstrom was watching. From somewhere, Mark slammed into the street a moment later, landing hard and breathing fast. He looked at the Reaniman and the Flaxens and the panicking civilians. His face went pale. What is happening? Peter didn't have time to explain gently. Portal guy. He's doing this. He's trying to make us fail. Mark's fists clenched. Where is he? Peter grabbed Mark's forearm. Mark, listen to me. Save people first. Mark's jaw tightened. If we don't stop him, we stop him by not letting him win, Peter snapped. He wants panic. He wants us to break. Mark stared at him. Peter's voice dropped. Urgent. You punch hard. You fly fast. That's great, but your brain has to stay with your heart. If you lose it, he wins. Mark's throat moved like he swallowed something painful. He nodded once. Then a portal opened above them. A larger one. Peter's spider sense screamed like fire. A shadow dropped out of the sky. Omni-Man landed in the street, calm as ever, like he arrived late to a meeting. He looked at the chaos with a flat stare. Then he looked at Peter. His eyes lingered on Peter's mask, like he was seeing through it anyway. Mark stepped forward. Dad. Omni-Man didn't answer Mark first. He kept his eyes on Peter. This is because of you, Omni-Man said. Peter's chest tightened. No, this is because of the guy opening portals. Omni-Man's voice stayed calm. And why is he opening them? Peter's spider sense buzzed. Trap in words. Peter answered anyway. Because he can. Omni-Man's gaze sharpened. Because you are here. Peter felt anger rise again, but he forced it down. Even if that's true, people still need saving. Omni-Man's mouth moved slightly, not a smile. You waste time. Peter stared at him. Excuse me? Omni-Man gestured at the civilians. All this effort, all this motion, all this restraint. You catch buses, you wrap enemies, you choose the slow solution. Peter's fists clenched. Omni-Man continued, voice flat. In a real war, that gets you killed. Peter's voice came out sharp. Maybe. But it also keeps them alive. Omni-Man's eyes flicked to Mark. Mark. Mark stepped closer, torn. Yeah? Omni-Man pointed toward a portal opening near the bridge. Stop the source. End the problem. Mark's body leaned toward it by instinct. Peter grabbed Mark's arm again. Mark. Don't. Mark yanked his arm free, conflict flashing across his face. Omni-Man's voice turned colder. Don't let a stranger teach you weakness. Peter's stomach dropped. That was the real fight. Not fists. Control. Mark looked at the bridge portal. People screamed there too. He looked at Peter. He looked at Omni-Man. For a second, Mark looked like he might split in half. Peter spoke fast, voice tight but honest. Mark, listen. My name is Peter. Mark froze. Peter kept going, because if he stopped, he'd lose the moment. I'm not saying that because it's safe. I'm saying it because you need to know I trust you. Mark's eyes widened. Peter. Peter nodded once. Now trust me back. Save people first. That's not weakness. That's the whole point. Omni-Man's eyes narrowed at the name, like it annoyed him that Peter had made a connection he couldn't control. Mark swallowed hard. Then Mark took off straight up, then angled down toward the bridge portal. Peter's heart dropped. But Mark didn't fly into the portal. He flew over the bridge, grabbed the nearest car that was about to fall, and set it down safely first. Then he started clearing civilians away from the portal zone. Peter's chest loosened. Omni-Man watched Mark do it, and for the first time, Omni-Man's calm looked strained. Peter didn't celebrate. He didn't have time. A portal snapped open behind Omni-Man, and Angstrom stepped out like a man stepping onto a stage. He looked at Omni-Man and smiled, wide and sharp. Hello, Nolan. Omni-Man's posture changed instantly, like a predator focusing. Peter's spider sense screamed. Eve arrived overhead, hovering, her suit dusty, her face tense. He opened a portal near the school. I sealed it, barely. Angstrom glanced at her and sighed. Always so helpful. Eve's hands glowed brighter. Stop this. Angstrom laughed. No. Omni-Man moved. He launched at Angstrom with a speed that made the air pop. Peter's eyes widened. But Angstrom didn't try to block. A portal opened in front of him, and Omni-Man flew through it. The portal closed. Another portal opened above the river. Omni-Man burst out, surprised for the first time, then reoriented instantly. Angstrom's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. You can't punch a door, Nolan. Omni-Man's jaw clenched. Peter's brain raced. Angstrom could dodge Omni-Man forever by moving the battlefield. But Angstrom couldn't hold portals open anywhere if he lost control of the pattern. Peter's spider sense buzzed, and he realized something important. Every time Angstrom opened a portal, Peter felt it a fraction of a second before anyone else. Not like a sound, like a pressure in reality. Peter looked at Eve. Can you make a shell again? Like before? Eve blinked. Around what? Peter pointed at the air near Angstrom's last portal location. Around the next one, the moment it opens. Eve's eyes widened. That's impossible. Peter shook his head. Not impossible. Hard. I can feel where it will be. Angstrom's laughter echoed again. You can feel portals? Interesting. Peter ignored him. He turned to Eve, voice urgent. I'll call it. You seal it. Eve swallowed hard, then nodded. Okay. Omni-Man reappeared through another portal, furious now, and he slammed into the street, cracking it. Angstrom stepped out behind him, safely distant. So much power, so little patience. Omni-Man's eyes burned. I will end you. Angstrom smiled. Try. Peter's spider sense spiked hard right behind Angstrom. Peter shouted, now. Eve thrust her hands forward. Matter bent. Air shimmered. A thick shell started forming right where the portal opened. The portal tried to bloom. The shell squeezed it shut like a fist closing. Angstrom's smile slipped. For the first time, he looked genuinely startled. Peter's spider sense screamed again another portal, to escape. Peter pointed fast. Left. 2 steps. Eve moved her hands again. A second shell formed. The portal popped open for a blink, then got trapped inside Eve's seal like a bug in a jar. Angstrom's eyes widened. No. Omni-Man launched again. Peter's spider sense screamed, Not at Angstrom, but at the collision that was about to happen. Omni-Man would kill him. And if Omni-Man killed him, what happened to the portals? Did they collapse? Explode? Tear wider? Peter didn't know. He didn't want to find out over a city full of people. Peter acted without thinking, because that was what he did. He fired a web at Omni-Man's forearm. It stuck. For half a second, Omni-Man's head snapped toward Peter, annoyed like a man swatting a fly. The web tore instantly. But that half second was enough. Enough for Eve to shout, "Nolan, stop!" Omni-Man didn't stop. He grabbed Angstrom through the weakening shell. The shell cracked like glass. Angstrom screamed, and his hands flailed, trying to open another door. Peter's spider sense went wild as reality shivered. Eve's eyes went wide with panic. If he opens it inside, Peter shouted, "Eve, hold it! Hold it shut!" Eve clenched both fists, shaking with effort as she forced the shell tighter around Angstrom's hands. Omni-Man squeezed Angstrom's throat and lifted him. Angstrom gasped, eyes watering, smile gone. "You can't control everything." Omni-Man's voice was ice. "Watch me." Peter's chest tightened. This was the moment. Omni-Man could end Angstrom. But Omni-Man wasn't the hero Peter thought he should be. Omni-Man was a storm wearing a man's shape. Peter stepped forward, voice loud enough to cut through everything. "Nolan!" Omni-Man's eyes flicked to him, sharp and angry. Peter forced himself not to flinch. "If you kill him right now and the portals go crazy, how many people do you think die?" Omni-Man stared at him like Peter had spoken a foreign language. Peter kept going, because stopping would be worse. "You want efficiency? Fine. Then don't be stupid. Don't gamble the whole city just to satisfy your ego." Mark landed nearby, breathing hard, having cleared civilians from the bridge portal zone. He heard the last part. His eyes widened at Peter saying it out loud. Omni-Man's gaze flicked to Mark. That flick mattered. Because Omni-Man didn't want Mark to see something. Not fully. Not yet. Omni-Man's grip loosened a fraction. Angstrom coughed, choking, and his eyes snapped to Peter with pure hatred. "You..." Peter's spider sense screamed. A portal tried to open under Peter's feet. Peter flipped backward just in time. The portal opened where he had been standing. It snapped shut an instant later, like Angstrom was throwing doors at him like knives. Peter landed hard, rolled, and popped up. He was breathing fast now. His web cartridge was low again. His hands ached. Eve was shaking, still holding the sealed portal shells in place, sweat on her brow. Mark hovered between Peter and Omni-Man, eyes darting, confused, scared, angry, all at once. Angstrom wheezed in Omni-Man's grip, but his smile tried to come back. "You can't hold me forever." Peter's brain raced. They didn't need forever. They needed now. Peter looked at Eve. "Can you lock those shells and drop them? Like, make them heavy?" Eve's voice trembled. "Yes, for a short time." Peter nodded. "Do it." Eve clenched her hands. The shells thickened, their surfaces hardened. They looked less like energy and more like dense matter. Angstrom's eyes widened in real fear now. "No." Eve dropped the shells. They slammed into the street like heavy blocks. Angstrom was pinned inside, trapped in a tight space with no room to move his hands properly. Omni-Man stepped back, eyes narrowed, surprised despite himself. Peter didn't wait. He shot webs around the blocks, layering them, tying them to street poles, anchoring them to the ground. He didn't know if webs could hold forever, but he didn't need forever. He needed enough time for Cecil to arrive with something smarter than a gun. Mark stared at the trapped blocks. "Is he in there?" Peter nodded, breathing hard. "Yeah." Mark's voice shook. "He said your name." Peter's chest tightened. Eve glanced at Peter, eyes wide. "Peter Parker." Peter swallowed. "Yeah." Mark stared like the world had shifted. How did he know? Peter shook his head. "He's been to my world. Or seen it. Or something." Mark's fists clenched. "That means he can go anywhere." Peter nodded. "And that's why he has to be stopped, carefully." Cecil's helicopters arrived seconds later. Spotlights lit the street. Agents poured in. Cecil's voice came through a drone, sharp and focused. Containment on the blocks. No one touches them until we lock the signature. Peter stepped back reluctantly, hands still raised like he didn't trust them not to shoot first. Cecil's drone angled toward Peter. "You interfered." Peter's voice went cold. "You're welcome." A pause. Cecil didn't argue. He just said, "We'll talk." Omni-Man hovered above the scene, staring at the webbed blocks like they were an insult. He looked at Mark once more, then at Peter. His voice was low. "You're reckless." Peter looked up at him. "And you're dangerous." Omni-Man's eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, Peter thought Omni-Man might hit him just to prove a point. But Omni-Man didn't. He turned away and flew off, leaving a shockwave behind that made loose paper flutter. Mark watched his dad disappear into the sky. Mark's face looked different now, less certain. Peter felt that and hated that he'd helped cause it. But he couldn't unsee what he saw either. Eve floated closer to Peter and touched his shoulder lightly. "You chose right." Peter's throat tightened. "I didn't choose home." Eve's eyes softened. "You chose people." Peter stared at the webbed blocks where Engstrom was trapped. He could still picture the portal to New York. He could still feel the pull in his chest. He whispered, mostly to himself, "Yeah." Cecil's drone hovered closer again. "Spider-Man, we will debrief. Then you will be placed under protective custody." Peter's eyes snapped to the drone. "No." Cecil's voice sharpened. "This isn't optional." Peter's hands clenched. "I'm not going in a box." Mark stepped forward, voice tight. "Cecil, he just saved the city." Cecil didn't respond to Mark right away. When he did, his voice was calm but firm. "Mark, go home." Mark didn't move. Peter looked at Mark, surprised. Mark's jaw set. "No." A long silence followed. Then Cecil spoke again, colder now. "Fine, Spider-Man, you can leave. For now. But understand this. You're involved whether you like it or not." Peter's voice came out steady. "I know." Cecil's drone angled slightly, like a nod that didn't want to be seen as one. "You'll keep the communicator." Peter nodded. "I will." "And you will answer," Cecil said. Peter didn't smile. "When people need help." Cecil didn't correct him. The drone turned away. Peter let out a slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Eve landed beside him, exhausted. We stopped him. Peter looked at the trapped blocks, at the agents, at the city lights beyond. He shook his head slightly. We stopped him for now. Eve didn't argue. Mark hovered close, voice low. "Peter, you could have gone home." Peter swallowed hard. He forced a small joke, because he needed something to hold on to. "Yeah, but then who would annoy you into being responsible?" Mark gave a shaky laugh. Peter looked at him, serious again. "You did good today." Mark's voice cracked slightly. "I almost didn't." Peter nodded. "But you did." Mark stared at the sky where his dad had gone. "My dad. He wanted to just end it." Peter's stomach tightened. "I know." Mark looked at Peter, eyes searching. "Is that normal here?" Peter's throat went tight. He didn't want to speak badly about someone's father. He didn't want to twist a knife into a kid's heart. So he chose the simplest truth. "I don't know what's normal here," Peter said. "But I know what's right." Mark swallowed and nodded slowly. Peter glanced down at his belt. His last web cartridge was almost empty again. He stared at it, then sighed. "Okay, new plan. I need a bigger lab, and a backup camera, and maybe therapy." Eve huffed a tired laugh. Mark actually smiled, small. The city below kept moving. Sirens faded. People stepped back out from hiding. Life continued. Just different now. Later that night, Peter sat on the same rooftop where he'd first argued with Cecil's drone. His suit was torn again. It always was. He had one fresh patch on his shoulder, 2 new burn marks on his glove, and a tiny cheap camera in his hand that had survived the night by a miracle. He took one picture of the skyline. Just the lights. No portals. No monsters. No blood. Just proof that he was still here. He heard footsteps behind him. He didn't flinch this time. Mark sat down beside him, leaving a careful space between them like he didn't want to crowd Peter. For a while, they didn't talk. The wind moved over the roof. The city hummed below like a giant machine. Mark finally spoke. "Cecil says they're moving Angstrom to a place he can't escape." Peter didn't look at Mark. "Cecil thinks there's always a place like that." Mark frowned. "You don't?" Peter paused. "I think people like Angstrom always find cracks. If not now, later. That's why we stay ready." Mark stared at his hands. "My dad thinks I'm weak." Peter's chest tightened. He chose his words carefully. "Your dad thinks caring makes you weak," Peter said. "That's not the same thing." Mark looked up. "What is it then?" Peter stared out at the skyline. He kept his voice simple. "It's fear," Peter said. "Some people are scared of caring, because caring means you can lose something, so they pretend they don't care at all. Then they call it strength." Mark swallowed hard. Peter added, quieter, "You cared today, and you still did the job. That's strength." Mark blinked fast, like his eyes stung. He nodded once. Peter tapped his camera lightly. "Also, I told you my name." Mark glanced at him. "Yeah." Peter's mouth twitched. "So, if you ever tell anyone, I will web you to a satellite." Mark gave a small laugh. "I won't." Peter nodded. "Good." They sat again. Down the street, a GDA drone hovered in the distance, watching the rooftop like it was counting breaths. Cecil wasn't done worrying. Peter didn't blame him. He just didn't want to be owned by it. Far away, in a quiet lab, Robot watched a video of Peter's webbing around the containment blocks. His eyes didn't blink. His mind didn't stop. He didn't say anything, but his fingers tapped once on a table, like he was saving a thought for later. And somewhere else, in a place with thick walls and colder lights, Angstrom Levies sat in silence. His hands were restrained, his face was bruised, his smile was gone. But his eyes still looked like doors. Peter didn't know that part. Not yet. On the rooftop, Peter stood up and stretched his shoulders, wincing. Mark looked up. "Where are you going?" Peter looked down at him. He thought of New York, the portal, the offer, the pull in his chest. He thought of the bus he'd saved on his first day here. He thought of Mark grabbing a falling car instead of chasing a fight. He lifted his mask just enough to breathe cooler air, then lowered it again. "I'm going to do what I always do," Peter said. Mark frowned. "Which is?" Peter stepped back toward the ledge. He spoke the words like they were a promise, not a speech. "Help," he said. Then he fired a web line into the night and swung out over a city that didn't believe in mercy. And he did the job anyway.